Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Public Works Committee will please come to order. We don't have a long agenda this evening, so we shouldn't be keeping staff extremely late. Now, we have, as usual, a consent agenda and a general agenda. The consent agenda items will be taken on one motion unless one is withdrawn for separate discussion. Are there any of the consent agenda items that need discussion in committee?
There are no items, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda items. Those in favor, please vote yes. Any opposed, vote no. And that's approved. Thank you. And we'll go then to item G1.
Item G1, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee report.
And I know that we have our Assistant City Manager, Duquesne, and we also have our Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator, Mr. Burzik, and our Transportation Director, and who else? Who could give this report? So who's up?
Somebody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, committee members and council members.
Matt Burzik, Winston-Salem City Pedestrian Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator.
That's correct, yeah. Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator with the City of Winston-Salem DOT. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information this evening. This was a topic at the, I believe, the August meeting, and we were asked to prepare some research on what other communities have done in terms of the formation and practices of their bicycle and pedestrian advisory committees. So that's the item here. We have some information related to the composition of that potential committee, the representation of that committee, membership requirements, the goals and vision and tasks for that committee, the need for one, the formation, and then kind of the operations of that committee. I don't know if you all have had a chance to review that, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any of those topics.
Well, let me ask you to talk a little bit more about potential committee composition. It looks like a good representation of disparate cycling interests, but there doesn't seem to be anyone on there for pedestrians.
Sure, yeah, and I think the pedestrian interest, we certainly have the transit agencies. That's certainly number one in terms of pedestrian advisory. But on top of that, I would add to this list a disability rights group like sorry, I'm blanking on the name right now, but have representation from that group. There are other, I think traditionally the bicycle advocacy has been, that's where the advocacy movement has been. There hasn't been as much movement on the pedestrian side, so we may not be able to draw from strict pedestrian advocacy groups, but there are certainly enough neighborhood organizations and similar groups that could serve as representation for the pedestrian interest as well.
I was thinking maybe a sort of a neighborhood alliance kind of representative. You could even draw on some of the running groups in town. There are two or three I can think of. The biggest one's probably Twin City, but there's it's sort of a youth-oriented. They call it crazy running. There's one associated with one of the major running stores.
Yeah, I think when it came time to actually request applications to the commission, we could cast a very broad net and reach out to all of the organizations that we work with generally to generate interest.
So let's get into questions here. Yes. Comments? Right.
But there are at least 4 or 5 people in different neighborhood groups in Northwest Florida that are very conscious of their active, so I'd love to have the opportunity to plug that in.
Ms. Scipio, did you have it?
Oh, I was going to say, make sure you include Black Girls Run. That's a big group.
Yep.
And we have quite a few youth athletic track clubs if you want to include them also. There are about 4 or 5 of them that are helping us with our Happy Field track of project.
Okay.
But I did have another question. It looks like we have these advisory committees in other cities and towns, and so the next step is for us to create our own. Is that correct? And the timetable, do we have a timetable for that?
Is that in the report, or is that
It
separate
is,
discussion?
it is not, that is a separate discussion, yes.
Do you have something in concept ready for us?
I think we could come up with that certainly pretty quickly.
Yeah, we have a template for
Nine.
boards and commissions.
Okay.
Ms. Sylvia, did you have a suggestion, Charlie?
The way things work in the city, I think I would never expedite anything because it takes more than what I think. But I suspect if we had something by the next time the committee meets in terms of a framework and a timetable, that we probably would be able to have this commission up and running by January, I would assume, so that they can start working on the next year and the spring, which is a good time to have some action happening.
Other thoughts on that?
I'd like to see the timeline,
Okay.
as quick as possible. Since we have things occurring all the time that we really should have input from this community on, currently because the board's not put together, we'll have that.
Now, no one signed up to speak, but I did see a hand go up from the audience. Would you like to come up and introduce yourself and give us some brief comments?
Hi, my name is John Gunkel. I live at 1080 Yorkshire Road. One of the first comments I had, in addition to the groups that you mentioned to be included as part of this process, it might include some of the schools, because they have a lot of walking back and forth between the schools. And some schools have programs about walking, so that might be another good group to include. Also,
Routes to school. but-
yeah, I think that's the name of it, right. The other thing, I really support what Matthew has put together here. I'm an avid pedestrian as well as an avid cyclist, and I think this process allows a much richer input into the entire process, and I think that's really needed for Winston-Salem.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
Hi, I'm Kathy Gondring. I am a member of the Recreation and Parks Commission. I live at 438 North Avalon Road in Winston. The other advantage I see of forming a BPAC is the advantage it has to you guys, so that you then have a group that you can get some feedback and impact on how, I guess, roads and infrastructure that you are deciding on might impact pedestrians and cyclists. So, again, I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments? Thank you. Mr. Larson, you have your hand?
Yeah, could I ask the awkward question about our return of the scooters and where they fit into our transportation planning? And it's not just scooters, of course, it's electric bikes. It's also, we now have single wheel units that are going around. I've seen a couple of those privately owned, some are corporate, obviously, on the scooters particularly. And as we look at forming the committee, are they going to consider that to be part of their agendas for interfacing with that?
I certainly think that's a good idea. We have this down as a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee, but it could very easily be a bicycle pedestrian micromobility committee, shared, active mobility, whatever you want to title it. But I think including scooters in there makes a lot of sense.
I think somewhere we have to have a home, for this. Automobiles are well represented. They have a presence. But I do wonder if these alternatives, whether it be pedestrian or scooters or bicycles, mopeds, what have you, segways, we have all of these other things that are on and around. Some of them we're allowing on greenways, some of them we're not. And I think there's some consistency issues here to look at as we go along. So if you could put that under your little tent
Yes.
and see if we can come up with, do we expect then to see another document as coming out of the next thing we will see will be a more formal presentation of composition, mission statement, areas of interest, whatever.
Yes.
I mean, your categories here are excellent. I mean, they're all inclusive. I think it's very, very good. And certainly the prototypes, but obviously there's a lot of fleshing out, I think, before this committee's ready to stamp on it. That's my sort of feeling. But thank you for the work you're doing on it.
I think just an overall observation, I think the additional suggestions for membership participation were very good. I mean, the school system, the Black Girls Run, the neighborhood groups, all were important additions, I think. Anything else on this topic?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do we anticipate any budget impact on this? Lee? Is this gonna, I mean, do we need to be looking at, you asked for a timetable, and obviously everything revolves around the budget. So as we go into the budget year, should we be looking?
At this point, it would, Matthew and DOT would be the staff to assist the committee. But as we move forward, I think probably the more likely budget impacts will be from recommendations that come from the committee.
So the committee itself will have
Yes.
minor expenses,
Yeah, those are,
bicycle trips to wherever. Be across state.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next item, please.
Item G2, presentation on signs for city buildings and facilities.
Okay. And presenting here, we have Mr. Muniel.
Thank you, Chairman Bessie, members of the committee. I have 300 very brief slides for you on signs. So we're talking about signs, and I think probably the word that stood out the most as we began to look at signs across city government is inconsistent. And so what we saw was inconsistent format, fonts, and in some instances just difficult to read. And so I want to go through a few examples for you. This is a water treatment plant, and the sign is on an awning above the building. Here, it's on a wall parallel to the street in the front of the building. This is a monument-type sign at a city-county utilities facility. And so you see this form that it continues to change for us. Again, continuing with form, this is a utility out in front of a fire station that we painted or wrapped and made into a sign. And still further, part of the landscape. And again, here you have a PVC pipe fence that concludes with a monument sign there. When you go to this fire station, this is over on Palmer Lane, there is no sign. And so too much of a variant there. When you look at the format, this is dark lettering on a white background. Again, a monument sign may be a great idea for us, but the delivery of it here may not be the best. Here, again, a monument sign parallel to the street. You have brick as the background, and you have silver lettering in front of that. And still here again on Ronaldo Road with Fire Station 8, you have the brick background, a black panel, and then you have the gold lettering on top of that. Nice sign, but again, not a part of a sign system that gives us some consistency. Another city-county utility facility, white lettering on a green panel, bordered by bricks that gives you a monument sign. When we look at the fonts, we see the same type of variant. This is Times New Roman. This is Arial. Arial is one of the better ones to use because it's simple, it's easy to read, and so we like to see that, but we see differences in some instances, and we shouldn't. This, even with a font expert on staff, we can't tell you what this font is, but we know it's a Sprague Street Recreation Center. And here, this photo, and I love the way staff produced this. This is from the eastbound lane at Salem Lake Road and Reynolds Park Road. Green and white sign that seems to kind of melt back into the background. We don't want to hide these great facilities. I know you want to make sure that the public sees them, and so this again, doesn't seem to rise to what we want to see. And I don't know if you can even pick that sign out. That's at the 14th Street Center. Again, the green and white blends into the background. When I first came to the city in 2001, those signs were brown with gold, which in the wintertime, they blended into the background. And so, yeah, that's right. That's right. So here we are again, back to a similar case where the lettering doesn't have enough contrast to be able to stand out against the bricks. And then here at Bellevue, again, not enough contrast to stand out against that background. And so the opportunities that we have in front of us really is to create a consistent sign system that gives us the opportunity to bring our branding forward. It increases our visibility, but probably more important than anything, it begins to impart our presence around the community to where on day one you see these signs and you go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that all of these city properties were around, very much like some business organizations in the community here. And we'll go to one of those. So this is the example of Wake Forest. We'll look at some of what stands out about their sign system. So always across the top is the white border. They have their logo there. So you have nice high contrast, white with a black fonting. They use very simple Arial font, and then the base is black or charcoal, and you can do this in a squatted sign or you can do it in a vertical sign. But the elements are consistent wherever you go throughout the city. We look at Novant, and perhaps they're even stronger because they made a more bold approach with a coloring that's very strong. But across the top, you have that white background, creates a great canvas to create good contrast. You have the NH or N colon, depending on how your eye is tracking that for Novant Health. And then on the bottom, you have the purple. And they're able to duplicate this at all different types of properties. And so what we produce for you is potential concepts. On the upper row, what you see is a more conservative approach. And on the bottom, we look at something that's more bold, that's intended to stand out and really capture the public's attention. And so I'll grab just one of each of those rows to give you a sense of how we could change the sign system, but then also an opportunity to see what they look like out in the wild. So this is probably the most conservative approach. This is the blue that comes from the city logo. So the base of it would be blue. You would have a white accent color, and then you would have the city's website at the top, and consistently the city logo in the lower right-hand corner. We recognize that in some situations, Reynolds Park is a great example where a sign has to do a lot of work there. You have, yes, you're in Reynolds Park, but you're also next to the quarry, and you're next to the golf course, and you're next to the maintenance center, and the pool, and the playgrounds. And so signing has to be efficient. And so that's a part of the example we want to show you there. So there's what it looks like out in the wild. So you can imagine being against that nice green background, perhaps at Salem Lake, that blue and white sign stands out. Here it is in the orange, and I apologize for there's extremely high contrast on that monitor, which you all, your finance committee approved moving that forward to replace these monitors. So that's coming. Councilmember Larson mentioned Clemson. I did not say Clemson until he did.
Well, blue and orange were the colors of Anderson Junior Senior High School.
Is that right?
So just so you know.
All right. So what we're trying to do there, and we think you saw on the second row of the concepts, we brought in different types of accent colors to just catch the eye and then to begin to embed that as a part of the brand. So there you see it in the different concepts, and here it is out in the field. Again, one of our focuses would be that, okay, you don't tear down an $8,000 monument sign. You find a way to take this new style and bend it to where it fits into that. But if you maintain the consistent approach that the colors are the same, the fonts are consistent, the logo, the website all exists there, we tell people what the facility is, then we've done our job for creating that consistency and imparting our brand across the city. This is an example that we also want to pay special attention to. We have numerous city-county facilities where the WS, while it's appropriate, we're all under that brand, we do want to allow that city-county utility should carry that city-county logo. But again, everything else would be consistent. And as much as inconsistent is the assessment of the current sign system, we think consistent needs to be how we build the future of sign system for the city.
I like the fact that the logo is on everything, because you drive by our facilities and there is no clear identification that this is the city's, you know, our parks and recs. People just know it's part, sort of kind of know it's part of the city, but they really aren't certain. So I certainly love the fact that we're going to have our logo on all of our buildings, and it needs to be consistent on everything we do, and I think we have a lovely logo. I like the fact of the contrasting color, because it brings added attention to you when you're driving by. So that in itself, that dual contrast, the blue, the white, and whatever that other contrasting color says, oh wow, yes, this is the city. It doesn't get lost with other kind of institutional logos. So I like the contrasting color. Red could be used.
You're not biased at all.
Really?
I did go there.
He's a Georgia fan, so he'd probably go for the red.
Great. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I had, oh, please.
First of all, thank you for doing this, long
Yes, sir.
overdue. We have a great need to begin to focus the assets of the city in a cohesive way, and you start with signage. I like Councilmember CPO, appreciate the logo being on the sign. I would actually suggest that we pop it out. I think it needs to be clear, maybe a little distinctive as a brand. And if we're going to do two colors, we're going to do the orange, we do the red, that logo pop out perhaps as a distinctive element, so that it is signature. It acts as a stamp, as sort of a corporate stamp on all of these signs, and doesn't get lost in just the general package. Because the one thing that's going to unify all these signs is going to be the color scheme and that logo.
Yes.
So I think we need to pay attention to that. I don't know how important the city of Winston-Salem.org is. Somebody who's the techies can put that on there, right? You know, and I'll defer to my colleagues on that as to whether that's really useful in this application or not. You know, as whether people are going to use these signs to navigate into the city system or not. I mean, I don't know. I like the colors. I like the contrast. I like blue. I think generally that's a good color. And I do like a contrasting color. I think it needs to pop a little bit more. We don't get too just standardized white and blue or whatever. We have a little bit of zip to this thing, a little bit of design. And I think with popping out the logo at the same color we use as the accent color, that may give us enough pop on it to make it a little bit more aesthetic. That's one opinion from a Gamecock. I suggest we use garnet and black.
Garnet and black.
But,
You had to do that, didn't you?
I'm sorry I started that.
Me too. Other comments? Yes.
Timing and cost?
Let me take that first. We are looking for some direction, hopefully, from this committee as we move forward. The most immediate need is, we've got architects already engaged, working on the next phase of our bond projects, and based on what happened with the last phase, we can show you a couple different examples where they're beautiful, but they're very inconsistent, and basically it was that architect's art project to do whatever they wanted to do. So we'd like to at least get started with the new projects. I think the cost to retrofit, Ed can give you a little bit of information. We have not. We're not suggesting we immediately go out and change all our signs out. I think the ones that probably are the most tired right now would be recreation signs, and then some of our other fire stations, and then working through them. But Ed, do you have any more information on cost yet?
We haven't, because one of the things we wanted to do is kind of solidify the design that we were headed in the right direction. And then you can imagine the difference if you look at this in a poly or a plexi material versus metal. One of the decisions that we have to consider is lighted versus not lighted. And so all of that factors in. We just wanted to get a sense that we were headed in the right direction, and we can start working on that. Yes, ma'am.
How many facilities are we actually looking at that would be impacted?
I had that number, council member, and
It's a lot.
Okay.
I
And,
apologize. I can get that to you.
and then,
83 parks.
Yeah, 75 parks
Yeah.
that, or,
Probably 200
yeah,
at least.
rec centers and
250.
everything together.
and then when we think of Union Station, it is in a historic area, and part of the land is designated historic, like the little circle roundabout.
Right, we would, that one,
How would that one be treated in signage? Because I don't think we've ever talked about
No.
that yet.
One of the elements of a project like this is you have to go back and establish what your standards are.
Yeah.
And so we would just have to hear from, we'd have to hear from the leadership on, where you want that type of variance.
Or historic resources
right.
or
I
historic
would have to
properties.
get-
who
They would have to
dictate that.
approve whatever we
Yeah.
did there.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, in, probably in Old Salem or West End, getting a blue with an orange sign approved by HRC would probably be fairly difficult.
Well, we'll do them last.
So, I would put forward that something a little more subtle, but I'm one of 8.
Yeah, I actually like the white and blue is my favorite. As Ed said,
Gray
the
is-
most
is the new black.
the most conservative, right? Ed? I would do want to brag a little on Ed because this is really cutting edge. It's not cutting edge for the corporate world, but I spent some time trying to find examples in other municipalities, and what I found was Raleigh, and most of them look just like ours, a hodgepodge of sometimes not identifiable signs.
I like the accent color, but for legibility, you really can't beat the white on dark blue. And so I'd be hesitant to put anything on the sign. If we choose to use an accent color, I'd be hesitant to put anything on the sign in terms of information, except for white on the dark blue. Your examples of some of the recreation and park facility signs in particular are very strong in identifying an actual public service problem, and you just don't see those signs, and you can't read them when you do.
But
They're pretty, but they're just not. Yes.
that's why I like the band, is it's almost like a banner or a flag on the top of the thing to draw your attention to this particular sign and differentiates, it's like a branding element. And so moving off of that, and without getting too deep in the weeds, can we pay some attention to the issue of sustainability in these signs and reuse of materials, or something that might be actually acceptable in the sense of materials that are selected, and so that we can claim that we're moving in the right direction here on this, because I think there are materials out there that are durable enough to sustain the kind of exposure that they're going to get.
That's right.
And let's just make that one of the things we're looking at as we get down into the specifications on it.
Mr. Larson? I'm sorry, excuse me, Mr. McIntyre.
To go to the younger generation cutting edge thing, what would it take to do iBeacons in these beacons?
So we've been working with beacons here since December of 2017, and actually because of some later items that we found here in the last couple of months, we're moving away from it because we have the ability to do some hyper targeting using the app that will come online. So the plan was to move away from that, but you're talking about $500 a year per location if you wanted to stick with the beacon option.
Whatever's most effective, but being able to roll up to a sign and
Yes,
be able
sir.
to get information on your
Yes, sir.
device.
Absolutely.
From whatever the technology is. I think
Yeah.
would be-
About $500, where the market is right now, about $500.
Yeah, I mean, QR codes or whatever, just so.
So you know what hours the park's open, yeah.
Right.
Well, it can serve you up a video,
Right.
can introduce you to some of the staff, can tell you about upcoming items like that. They can give you a more rich experience. Yes, sir.
Contact.
We can do it.
You're at a fire station or whatever, yeah.
Mhm.
Keep in mind, we have just spent the better part of a year arguing about less than $100,000 of cost on a handful of signs. So, I mean, this is gonna really crank up there when we get into replacement signs.
Right.
The point, I think, is very well taken about if we can get ahead of, if we can adopt the concept and get ahead of the curve on new facilities, it's a great time to start. But, in terms of that retrofit, we may not be looking at doing that over there.
That's true.
Good work. Other points on this item?
Keep going.
If
All right,
not
keep
that,
going.
thank you very much. That actually concludes a short agenda this evening. Ms. McCullough, anything that we have left out on your items? Mr. DeCane, anything? No, sir. All right, if there are no further business items to be brought up, I will thank everyone for your participation, and we will stand adjourned.